Hi, folks. Thanks for watching this video. It's actually a really important one because research is a component of this paper. And if the sources you're using are not kind of living up to what they need to be, that's going to be an issue and can impact your grade. And so I would love for you to really focus on this so that you're able to pick a source that not only fits what we need, but also helps you kind of extend and develop your argument. All right, so like it says in the beginning, you got to find some sources for this paper. While I would love for you to use the databases on the library's website, like JSTOR, Statista, EBSCOhost, things like this, your sources don't necessarily need to be from there. In terms of this paper, what I'm looking for is more about the source being credible rather than scholarly. And so, in order to tell if something is credible, these are the sort of questions you can use to help evaluate whether or not the source is credible. So things like checking out the author, who they are, what expertise they have, these things are really important. I'll give you a quick little example. In a different class, when we are doing this topic, I had two people look up gender roles. One person found it from some kind of random website, and when we looked at the author, it was a person who didn't have a degree, let alone a degree. Wasn't even writing in the field of psychology, gender roles. Didn't have any background in the field whatsoever. The other person was a psychology professor who had written books on gender roles and things like that. And so, when you're looking at those two sources, they're both talking about and dealing with gender roles, but the authors are completely different. So it's important to look at who's authoring these sources because, a lot of times you can have a source that maybe says something relatively same to another source, but, in terms of the credibility of the authors, that's going to push one of them over the finish line in terms of which one you should use. And then the information too is just going to be a lot more reliable. So looking at who the author is important, and that's not just when if you're using something like Google, that's going to be really important. Even if you're using something like JSTOR, that's still something you should keep in mind. Uh, Another thing to kind of think about is this, like what value does the source have? So I'll give you an example. Um, if you're using JSTOR, a lot of scholarly articles are going to be doing a lot deeper dive on the topics like gender roles. And so those could be useful so that they help you kind of gain a deeper insight into the topic. Whereas, if you're looking at like Time, Newsweek, New Yorker, those Atlantic, those sorts of magazines, they're going to be doing kind of more of a superficial overview of the topic, not because they're bad, but just because that their audience isn't going to have the same sort of attention span, understanding, expertise as in these scholarly articles. So that's something to think about. And yes, of course, like if you find a story in the essay in the Atlantic, that yes, that's going to be credible, but in terms of the academic value, it might not have as much as a scholarly article dealing with the same topic. Lastly, being on the internet is really hard, and so that when you're thinking about finding sources there, it can be really difficult, trying to weed through them all. When I was going to school and took this course oh so many years ago, um, we still had things card catalogs, and if you wanted to look up a topic, you would have to use card catalogs, and instead of things like JSTOR, there were actual like rows and rows of journals where you would actually have to look up the articles and kind of look through them. Obviously, I wasn't living in, you know, the dark ages. The internet still existed, but that it wasn't, you know, it wasn't really a primary focus for me in the beginning of college. Obviously, later it became a much bigger, but in the beginning, you know, first year, it just didn't seem like it was used as much as it is now. Now it's the kind of the only place people go, right? Like we hardly ever go to the library and check out, you know, the card catalogs, the digital ones at least. And so the only reason I mention this is that for me, when I was going to school, it was a lot harder to find sources, and it felt like there weren't as many, but the ones you did were going to be, it was a lot easier to determine their credibility. Now you have like fake news and fake websites and all sorts of stuff that you have to filter through. And so, you know, part of, I think, what your real job is as academic writers and researchers at this point is, you know, finding them is going to be the easy part. Determining their credibility is the hard part. And so that's why I just want to kind of stress this about really thinking about how, why is this credible or why is it not credible? Because it's going to kind of make or break you in terms of this paper. Okay. And so I really want you to focus on that. And if you ever have a doubt, like, oh, is this credible? Email me. This is the easiest thing in the world. You can show me the source and we can talk about it and see, you know, hey, is this something that should be using? Okay. So that's that. Uh, and the other thing, I mentioned this in the intro to the unit and the thesis one. When you're using these outside sources, you really have to be careful about remembering that your audience, me, the other students in the class, you know, the college, we haven't necessarily read everything you researched. 25 of you times two sources, right? 50 sources doesn't seem like a lot, but it's not really possible for me to read every single source everyone's referencing, so that, you know, even I am not going to have a in-depth understanding of each article that outside source you're using. So that's why it's important to establish the credibility of the writers that you're using, to give us context to what you're talking about, and relate it to what you're going over. One last, one last. I keep on thinking of things to add to my outline. The other thing I would just mention here about sources is that when you're looking for what to look for, I would look at sources that help you extend the argument out. So, for example, you know, if you want to look at something like Statista that does statistics, and you might think about like, well, how does like what are the statistics of how gender roles might impact women's ability to move up in the workplace, or like what are the percentage of CEOs, and what amount of them are women, and how do we attribute that to gender roles. So you could extend it that way. You could also kind of maybe, you know, kind of take it in a new direction and think about, you know, wage inequality, something, the readings that gone over it we haven't talked about. Maybe doing something like that, kind of extending out the argument. So when you are looking for research for this particular unit, I would kind of look for sources that do one of two of those things: either extend the argument, take it into a new direction that's, you know, but part of the same sort of idea about gender, or maybe kind of go into more depth than some of the readings do go over, right? Like kind of back it up, like with real world statistics or things like that. All right. So thank you for listening again and watching this. As always, if you need any help, I'm always here for you. Please email me or contact me whatever way it works for you, and I can help you find research, point you in the right direction, or even reassure you that the research that you do have is working. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.